All right, sounds good. All right, so we will call this WDIC meeting to order. Let's see. Does anyone have any announcements? No announcements. Okay, so we can go to minutes approval. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the minutes? Can we get a motion to approve the minutes? Kate? Seconded.
Second.
By Leslyn. And I guess we'll just do a raise of hands. If you approve, just raise your hand. All right, minutes approved. So for discussion items, we had received an email from Veronica looking for just having a hard time kind of understanding the role of WDIC and its intersections with other committees. And I noted to her that, the history of this committee is really important to the work. And so I was hoping that some founding members might just give a brief history. When I was new to WDIC, I found that incredibly helpful in understanding the purpose and role of the committee. And I think Lisa and Leslyn are the only ones here that were there at the beginning.
I can't claim to be a founding member. I came on a couple of years into it. So I would defer to Leslyn if you could provide some of that background.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I had to run out my room for a minute. This is about WDIC. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but the story behind this. WDIC got started in 2005. I think it's 2005. I can't even remember anymore. 2005, and the 2004 budget year, we had some real troubling employee relationship issues, especially with employees of color in certain departments that traditionally didn't have employees of color. And we planted employees of color in those departments, and it became difficult. And so we started to think about what are ways to encourage our workforce to be more respectful of diversity, to be more respectful of inclusion, and how do we get our departments to sort of understand what it means to make your environment welcoming. So some of those incidents were very egregious. What ended up happening is in 2005, the chair of the legislature at that time, Tim Joseph, listened to me whine and allowed me to promote a white paper to him saying we should have, what I was looking for was a workforce, was a diversity, a department of diversity and inclusion. That's what I was looking for, not a committee. A department that focused exclusively on that, or a subdivision of a department that focused exclusively on that, including a position like Deanne is in right now. That didn't fly. And so the next thing was to I'm not giving up, so we're gonna have something, and that was to have a committee. And to make the committee a special committee of the legislature. It couldn't be a standing committee because my vision for it is that if we're talking inclusion and justice and diversity, we can't have it just be only legislators. We wanted to have full buy-in from the entire organization and the community in helping to transform Tompkins County to a best in practice organization that's fully representative. Those were the words I used in this white paper. And so we needed to make sure that our frontline staff were included, labor representatives were included, supervisors, legislators, etc., on a 15-person committee, up to 15-person committee. Because it's not made up of exclusively legislators, it could not be a standing committee of the legislature. We had community members and everybody else, as I mentioned. The purpose of this committee was literally to work on the goal of transforming Tompkins County into being a best in practice organization, a fully representative, best in practice organization relative to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. That was in 2005. We had done in 2005 also, we did a survey, a climate survey of a couple of departments that were having real major issues, and the departments that were the impetus for the start of this committee. And we found out that the issues ran deeper than some of what we had surfaced. So the legislature agreed to have this committee be this strange animal made up of so many different entities to help the legislature and Tompkins County as a whole work towards its transformation. So WDIC was incredibly important in setting the framework for what we need to do to be fully representative, to be inclusive, to be an organization that preaches, practices, and infuses diversity, inclusion, justice, and equity in everything we did. So we did a lot of work in challenging civil service, for example, work in the practice of civil service, which we know is biased and unfair. We challenged the civil service folks to allow us to go to pilot a pass-fail system. And this is civil service, state civil service, pass-fail system. We were unsuccessful in that. WDIC was responsible for how do we get people in the door. And I worked with the HR department to create the information aid positions, which are patterned after a position we have here at GEC. At first, it was a lot of pushback. And I'll just be honest and say, no, there's already precedence. We already have positions like that exist. We call them program assistants here. The state already approved for those, so we can have those positions that are entry level, have benefits, pay decent wages, and allow people to get their foot in the door while we prepare them for taking the civil service exams and moving into higher level positions. Because we weren't getting people in the door just taking the civil service exam. So we created the information aid position, we petitioned the state, and the state approved for those to happen. That's why we have those positions now. Those are some of the things that the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee focused on. We focused on, and that was our charge, really was to oversee the transformation of Tompkins County to what I mentioned as an infusion, complete infusion of, and infusion is not even a word, but really just being a part of DEIJ. We worked on, and so we had an entire plan in starting from the ground level training, groundwater training, so that everyone across the county was starting at the basic level of understanding of DEIJ. So trainings from just understanding what the words mean, all the way to advanced training and implementation. We worked on the policy. Legislature was not, game from policy. They just wanted a policy statement and not a full policy implementation. That came later. We worked on, of course, a diversity statement. We wanted something to be representative of when you look at this logo, this was Tompkins County and what Tompkins County, click on it, what Tompkins County stood for. And one of our bigger projects, aside from a lot of training, we did a lot of training along the way for, for people all across the organization. The other thing that was part of our plan of action was also providing tools for our departments and department heads to be able to use for recruiting and for retention. So we developed a marketing, recruitment, and retention marketing guide, a recruitment marketing guide, I think it was, just listing all the organizations that one can reach out to and advertise with when you're looking for employees. So focused on those things as part of the plan, as well as intervention whenever issues came up that were brought to our attention that were challenges to diversity, challenges to inclusion, challenges to equity, that we had a role in intervening wherever it was happening to help educate and to help resolve the issues in amicable ways. So overall, in a nutshell, I can talk more, that is what the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee was about. The Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee, I considered, and still do, one of the most powerful committees of the county, mainly because of its composition. The county government responds to employees, responds to constituents, responds to itself. And here's a committee that's made up of people at all those levels. And the work it is proposing to do throughout the county is to change how we do business in Tompkins County. So again, broad overview of the committee. Out of WDIC came subcommittees, came the climate survey, which we had not done in Tompkins County, and taking the pulse of the county workforce and implementing some of the recommendations, including exit interviews, including onboarding practices, including employee recognition. Those are all things that came out of the work of the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Questions?
Veronica?
No questions, just thank you, Leslyn, for laying all that out. And I know there's decades of detail or a decade and a half of detail you didn't get to cover, but this was very, very helpful for me. And thank you, Rachel, for sending me the bylaws as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And WDIC is supposed to also, I mean, short of absence of Deanna's position, WDIC was also present and all major hirings for the county, because that's where, you know, our presence helped to inform when things were going sideways, and to pull people back and to, you know, help people understand why they need to be considering certain candidates and not others, and how do we open doors. So that was one of the things also that we were, and still are, should be at the table for all of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslyn. Okay, so next on our agenda, we have a proclamation for Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. And I want to thank Deanna and Brittany for working on that proclamation. Everyone should have gotten that in their inbox this morning. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that proclamation?
I'd like to just thank Dr. Clark for making the connection to IAAA, the Ithaca Asian American Association. They will be present to accept the proclamation. And so thank you for Dr. Clark making that, being such an advocate and resource for the work. And so we just updated what some information was there last year and trying to make it more modern or current in terms of some of the things that are happening. And also thank you, Brittany, for the work and your contribution there. And thanks to some members of Team Jedi who contributed as well.
So this committee needs to approve that before it goes to May 3rd, is that right?
Technically, you don't have to, but this committee has always kind of given its blessing to that. So yeah, I'm usually a mover and a seconder, and then a vote as well. Okay,
all right.
The only
Deanna,
question,
yeah.
The only question I had around that was that we were going to ask IAAA to look this over, because my understanding is that we were going to give them a chance to provide any additional feedback, knowing that I don't know if there will be a lot, but I just wanted there to be understanding that I know we're going to, it sounds like, accept the proclamation or whatever the terminology is, Brittany, but at the same time, there may be some modifications based upon their feedback.
Well, then you could make the whoever's the mover and the seconder could make the motion to accept or approve the proclamation with the understanding that someone from the IAAA will potentially be making changes to it, which will then be moved forward to the legislature.
Okay. Would someone move? And moves. Lisa seconds. And let's just do hands again. If you approve, raise your hand, please. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have update on the DEIJ strategic planning process.
Well, just as an update from last month, we discussed it here, and I said that I would send it to the committee. Send it to the committee just to look at closely. I received a couple of comments. It's not a specific vote, but if there was more feedback, we're just asking for that today by 5, if that's okay. If anybody has anything, then from there, we're going to convene the committee. Those who are already a part, like Leslyn and Rachel, if you have anything, just let me know, because we'll continue to work on this together throughout the year. And so I always take it as, if I don't hear from you, that doesn't mean I'm not going to call. So we're going to continue to move ahead with that, unless anybody has any significant questions or concerns. From what I've received so far, no one has really more. I've received a couple of clarifying questions, not any process questions.
I thought it looked great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Deanna. And next is Team Jedi update. And before Deanna says more about that, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that came up in our last meeting. Jackie at the Office of Employment and Training talked about a pilot project that they're working on there. It's hopefully going to become, from the pilot project, a certification program for employers. And so the training is partnering with URO, the Ultimate Reentry Opportunity Program, and they're calling it Reimagining the Workforce. And Jackie talked about how most of their trainings have been about readying people for employment, and they're really trying to make it a two-way street, where this training is focused on readying employers to make sure that, they understand systemic barriers to attract and retain diverse employees, and that they understand the importance of workplace culture. So I thought that was really great. And then Andrea from COFA mentioned that there is an open house at COFA on May 13th from 12 to 3. And they'll have tables with staff and information regarding the programs and giveaways, food, and video that they'll be showing that they're filming right now. And that's what I have. Do you have more for the Jedi update, Deanna?
Just as a supplement to the email I sent as well, I sent the goals for Team Jedi as well to the committee for any ideas or questions. And the Recognition and Appreciation Committee will continue to support WDIC in terms of providing the alerts related to cultural celebrations, as we've agreed to last year. In addition to that, the Data and Analysis Subcommittee will support the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Strategic Planning process, which is being led by WDIC. And so I don't have any additional information other than we have 2 new members, Team Jedi, Michael Steitley, who's the Department of Emergency Response Department Head, and Jennifer Forte from the Mental Health Department. And so we're excited to have them. And then in terms of filling out the memberships a little bit more, I'm following up with all the departments who don't have representation on Team Jedi so that we can have all 28 departments represented, if at all possible, knowing that a couple of departments have only 1 person, and our good colleague from the Veterans Department is there. So there's one other department that we can look for with 1 person who may be able to be of assistance. And so we're again reaching out again for that breadth and scope, and we're continuing to move ahead. And then also the one proud thing that I continue to say is we have not had any Team Jedi members resign or leave because of disinterest in the work. We've had some people leave the organization, and then at that point, then we always check with human resources on why people are exiting the workforce, what is happening, what tools will they carry with them. And I've actually, for several of the employees who have left the organization, I sent nice notes back saying this was so meaningful. I've even had employees tell me at various times we're having a hard time, this is the one reason why I work at Tompkins County. And I said, thank you, but we'll get some more than that, So I'm just need a little bit more than that. So this is a really good, solid group of people who are working really hard. Dr. Clark, do you want to add anything in addition to what Rachel said?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think you covered it both.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving on, we have Juneteenth as a paid holiday update. So I know that April 19th, the resolution was approved by the legislature. And I know next steps is something with the union, but I don't know exactly. Lisa, could you tell us more about that?
Sure. So Ruby has prepared a memoranda of understanding with for all of the unions. And they've gone out for signature. We've gotten 2 of them back so far, 2 more to go. And we're working with the HR payroll team to make all of those programming changes happen. Just the behind the scenes logistics of how people get paid or paid overtime if they're scheduled to work that day. But other than that, we're good to go, and employees are the unions that we've been in touch with, all of them have been pleased and grateful for the paid holiday.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So next is an update on the Juneteenth celebration programming. And we know that we have Annette Gordon-Reed to be speaking. That's going to be Monday, June 13th, 4:15 to 5:15 p.m. We had one meeting. It was just Ken and I. And so we talked a little bit about we looked at the notes from our debriefing meeting after the celebration last year. We talked about doing a picnic again, which has been decided to be June 17th at noon, right, Dr. Clark?
Yep.
And right now, I think we're really just looking for more volunteers to help plan and help us make that picnic happen, and other ideas as well for how we can celebrate. Ken, do you have any more you want to add to that?
Well, we will be scheduling, Carmen will be in contact with the list of folks we currently have on the committee for a meeting next week to begin to focus on the picnic planning. And so, and I also put out a call for volunteers yesterday at Team Jedi, and I'll do the same here as well. I need some bodies, some folks to help us with this. I know, there are many pulls on people's time and schedules and such, but I'll still issue that call for volunteers for planning.
And do you know what kind of work might be involved in that?
Well, primarily it's about really sort of, in terms of the picnic, addressing some of the logistical issues in terms of one, identifying vendors, getting some, putting in a request with facilities to help with the setup and breakdown, although, primarily volunteers will kind of take the bulk of that. Coordinating with GIAC on that in terms of the staging area for in the kitchen and such, and a number of other details of that sort. And so, sort of identifying that, and also to making some changes to what we did in terms of, for instance, we need to have banners that identify the food stands and what's being served, for example.
Okay. I can check with Kathy to make sure that it's okay, but I wouldn't mind volunteering as long as I don't have to be like a face to talk about it.
Okay. That'd be okay.
I can do coordinating and planning and all that good stuff.
Okay.
That's fair, Brittany.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll welcome you.
Deanna, and then Ann.
Just two quick questions. Lisa, I know that we're working on the food policy and the reward and recognition, the word policy. Are there any things or processes we would need to follow or do things differently for this year in preparation for this? Is one question that I had. And then the second thing in terms of Dr. Clark, I think her name is Carmen, the person who sends the, will you ask her to send a calendar notice? They're in the email, but if it's not a calendar, sometimes you can read through and look and think it's on your calendar and it's not.
Okay.
For those who may not be on top of their calendars, myself sometimes included, send that calendar.
Sure.
Thank you.
So Deanna, your question is about the purchase of food for this event. We'll have to discuss it with finance. It seems to me like it's a commemorative event on behalf of the county, and we're are we doing in partnership with the city again this year?
Yes.
We are hoping so. I'm waiting to hear back from Shelley on that. I think they've had a couple of procurement questions come up about food and things like that, or whether or not how their perceptions of some of these things. And so we can talk about it in a different space, but
Okay,
we would
let's
love
talk
to.
about it because, yeah,
We have reached out and extended the invitation. We would love to.
okay.
Annie?
Thanks. I was thinking about when Dr. Clark mentioned food vendors, and I was just always like to put a shout out, and I can't remember the name of the food vendor, but they're a family-owned business, and they provide food up at the airport.
Yes.
Southern food, and it's really, really, really good. And I know they do catering. I don't know if they do an event this big, but I always like to support, they're local and they're already doing some work within the county. And I'm looking up here on the Ithaca Airport website and trying to find it, and I see nothing about food vendors. And I know we want to support people going up to the airport to eat lunch or supper up there. So I will put a word to Roxanne, the airport director, to make sure they're highlighted on the website there.
Okay. Thank you, Annie.
Legacy Cafe, right?
That's
Sounds like it.
yes. Yeah, the vendor we used operates under a different title, but they're related. They're the folks who are involved with Legacy and the caterer that we use, they're all part of the same actual family. I just can't think of the name of the vendor either, but I have that information from last year.
Leslyn, did you have something? I saw you on mute.
No, I didn't understand what Dr. Clark was saying. The vendor and the.
Well, last year when the vendor was not Legacy per se, it was the catering operation that one of the Barrett's runs. I just can't think of the name of the caterer right now.
So we had 3 different vendors last year. And then we had Maurice just bring us some sweet potato pies.
Yes, his catering business was one of them.
Okay.
Yes, that's who I was referring to.
Okay. Got it.
Are there any other questions, concerns, comments about the Juneteenth planning?
This is a question for Dr. Clark. Are we thinking we'll do, I know you mentioned a speaker, I know you mentioned an employee lunch. Are we planning to do a whole week of festivities like last year, or just more scaled back, or to be determined? It could be to be determined by the committee.
It could be determined by the committee. I mean, I was envisioning possibly something done in the middle of the week. We've got Monday and Friday as the bookends. And so, I mean, if the committee chooses next week to do so, I mean, we can certainly plan toward it and get that ball rolling, or simply highlight the bookend events.
I had brought up also that I think we could also plug Southside's Juneteenth more than we did last year,
Mhm.
because they put on a really great event every year. I grew up in Binghamton, had no idea what Juneteenth was my whole life until I moved to Ithaca and went to their celebration and learned a lot. And I imagine there's a lot of community members and employees that also, you know, I'm sure they heard about it because of our festivities last year. But I think we could push more people to attend their event also.
Yeah. And that would be part of the promotion of the city county event.
Okay. Next on our agenda is the extension of the workforce reading and discussion program.
Just wanted to share as a follow-up to our discussion we had a month or so ago. We're looking to schedule 3 additional sessions. We had talked about last month, you know, what do we do after the 4 weeks? And then we're trying to do some more real work application with the program. And so I consulted with the participants and they would like to do more. And so we're doing bring a friend to the process, in addition to the folks who are already participating in the program, or a friend or two to build the numbers, but then also at the same time, give them, start to operationalize that more and give it more life. And so we're going to see how this goes. The city's going to do with this as well. So I'm working on getting the contracts and things together, but it's also just trying to be responsive to some of the things that we heard here, but then also make the discussion more concrete and tangible about how you apply to the workforce, because we did the book read, more philosophical. We talked about the history, in terms of different civil rights and different things that have happened throughout our country's history. And now we want to talk about our application for the workforce. And we think that that's going to be a meaningful discussion. And Dr. Gonzalez has agreed to do that for us. And so just wanted to highlight that. And so we'll keep working on it and then see what happens next. And next year will be different, and we'll continue to push forward. And then I'm even thinking about if it's a once a quarter and just changing the whole, vibe of the program. And then if we're able to get together in person at some point where it's safe for everybody, really trying to bring more creativity to that process.
So we don't have any dates yet for those
Yeah.
3 additional sessions, right?
No, we don't. We're thinking
Okay.
we're trying to get them started at the end of May, early June. But that's what we're looking at this time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Leslie, do you have a question? I thought you came up mute.
Oh, no,
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Okay, thanks, Deanna. Next on the agenda is 2023 Workplace Climate Survey update. I know so we had talked about it. When did we talk about this? Oh, in our meeting with Henry.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And
okay.
you had mentioned there was a date that you were hoping to send RFPs out.
Oh, okay. You just mean big picture process wise. That's used to be looking like,
No.
that was in relationship to Amy. Amy, by the way, if you're watching and you can hear me, feel free to jump on here at this point, Amy Hendricks. So what they're talking about doing the closeout for the 2018 survey. And so they're going to be doing some wrap up work there. And then also saying the organization is scheduled to have the 2023 climate survey. And that's where Ruby and I are supposed to be leading that process, knowing that we would start looking at bids, looking at different vendors in the fall of this year. And so I didn't have like a robust update, but just saying that I know that there's money appropriated for the climate survey closeout for this year, but then also it's my understanding that Amy's intending to bring together information related to the values and what each one of these committees accomplished in one final form. And then that would launch once we wrap that up in a bow, we would start the next planning process. And we would bring that information back to this committee for consideration, and what went well, what did not go well, how would we want to do things differently for the upcoming climate survey. Again, shifting it to more working with human resources and the chief equity and diversity officer in collaboration with county administration as a whole. That's what I know about this. Now, I'm gonna call Lisa Holmes, and she's, is that what you understand as well, Lisa?
Yes, yes, you
Okay.
summarized it. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, Deanna, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I just know that's important to this committee, so I want to make
Okay.
sure that we know what's going on with that.
Oh, sure.
Awesome.
I'm happy to share. Just one of those things, you know, how you are in transition where things go from one role to another. And so that's what I know about it, but I also don't want to speak too confidently about some things that I may or may not be familiar with. So,
Yeah, no,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Sure.
it.
Sure.
Okay, so then we have, we had talked about bringing on new members for WDIC. And Deanna mentioned that we might want to think about having a nominating committee out of WDIC members. She and I had a meeting last year about recruiting new members, and we just didn't want it to be like a behind the scenes kind of thing. We wanted to invite others who wanted to participate in that process to participate. So it's okay if no one wants to. If it's just Deanna and I, that's fine. If other people want to help out with recruiting some folks to join WDIC and help us with this work, just let us know, because we'd like to make it, you know, official and not just a side meeting, bringing people on kind of thing. Does anyone want to discuss the idea of having a committee of this special committee for recruiting new members?
I would be willing to help with it if you guys need some assistance.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate.
I guess I have a question, or maybe this is what you would discuss on this committee is, of the subcommittee, is that are there perspectives that we're wanting to have on WDIC that we don't currently have? Are there people not at the table that we would like to have at the table, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
We specifically, when we talked about this, when it first came up, was when there was significant rise to anti-Asian hate sentiment, and in terms of there were lots of things that happened. So we'd like to have representation there. We'd also like to have representation from our Latinx community. We'd also like to have more representation from our ability and disability populations. And so there's these several areas that we are looking to expand in those spaces. And when it came up, we know this is a committee and there are processes to it. And so Rachel and I, again, Rachel, she mentioned before, we didn't feel comfortable saying, oh, we just went out and identified some folks and there was another process by which we would follow. We want to do that, but also we want to be empowered through this committee to be able to move forward with whatever the process should be, and then work with Brittany and bring information back, but then in a certain way, have a confidential discussion around membership and what that would look like. But we also didn't think it would be appropriate just to be discussing people's names like in this forum. And so she had talked to us about that, which told us that we could functionally have an executive session so that we could bring the information forward in the appropriate way. So those are the kinds of things that we were asking to in terms of this committee.
I don't think
And-
that I could reasonably commit to the subcommittee time itself at this time. But as priorities and directions come from those conversations, I would be very pleased to recruit through my networks.
And I wanted to add, Deanna, if the nominating committee wasn't necessarily comfortable or didn't have time to do an executive session during this meeting in particular, just because of the time of the meeting, you could always schedule a special nominating committee meeting to discuss those applications and or membership.
Thanks, Brittany. And
Yeah, I was gonna, some people already mentioned some of the things that I was gonna say. I guess the only other thing I would add would be to thinking about, and maybe this is part of what Leslie's going to say, but thinking about when Leslie talked about the history of the various folks and departments we wanted to reach out. I think I remember her saying supervisors and in addition to people in the community. And I was also thinking about, departments that maybe haven't been represented on here or represented on here in a while. And also including union reps we haven't had in a while. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Leslin?
So thank you all, and I'm glad to hear this conversation surfacing. Just going back to, talking a little bit about the history, that was exactly how we started, is recognizing who's not at the table. And we were very purposeful and deliberate in making sure that we had representation. And that's why it was Kate, about a 44-person committee at one point, that we had representation from as many walks of life that we can have. So abilities are represented, union, LGBTQ committees, community was represented, Asian, Indigenous people, like all through. So I'm glad to hear this surfacing again, because over years, people have sort of, left, people have passed away, any number of things, have happened. And so it's good to hear that resurfacing so that we can get that representation back on the committee. The other thing, while I have to floor, that I just wanted to add that I forgot to add in talking about just the history of this, is that the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee has had the authority to ask of departments, generally through administration, to take on certain tasks that are about DEIJ work. So we work closely with administration, and we've asked for administration to be present because we believe strongly that administration needed to be on board, because a lot of what we will authorize or we would request of departments needed to be supported by administration. A good example is the request that HR develop exit interviews, or even the onboarding process. Those were things that came from WDIC and were requested directly of the department head, because HR always had a role on WDIC and a seat at the table, and should have a seat at the table in WDIC. Some departments are good with honoring the request, because that's an authority given to the committee, and others we have gone through administration to make sure that those things have happened, whatever the things are, move forward. Another example is requesting of the Office of Human Rights back then, when we wanted to have some education around being a safe zone. The Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee said it's imperative that we have those safe zone cards displayed throughout our organization, but that needed to be followed with education on what does it mean and what is your responsibility once you display a safe zone card. What is the expectation? And so we required the Office of Human Rights to create educational materials to go with that, and not only create it, but also share that throughout the county, going around and doing the educational session, showing the video, talking about it, and engaging in conversation. But I just want to make sure that that authority piece is also emphasized for what WDIC can do.
Thanks. Yeah, that's an important piece. Mhm. Any more discussion? Oh, Deanna, yes.
I just have a question. Brittany, can you share the information you just shared with me? I'd asked Brittany just in terms of the number of vacancies we have here, just to confirm again, the number of vacancies, but then the number of members the WDIC can have, and then what this would need to look like, what would need to happen if we wanted to increase the number. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that, just so that everybody has the same information.
I may need to take that back, actually, Deanna. Hang on one second. Let me count that.
I'm sorry.
So actually, WDIC has 3 vacancies. I lied. There are 3, not 1. And the committee can have anywhere between 11 and 15 members. They are undesignated seats, which means that they don't have to be a legislator or a specific community member or anything like that. Though that number can be increased if you amend the bylaws, which isn't necessarily a hard process, but sometimes can be a pain in the butt. But yeah, so there's 3 vacancies and can have between 11 and 15 members.
Thank you, Brittany. And by
You're
the way, you had told me 3 prior. I just thought something happened that I wasn't aware of. So scale.
Just miscounted.
Ann?
Thanks. I'm just wondering if somebody could just kind of put a footnote on one of the things that Leslyn said about the little stickers that I've seen up around businesses and for LGBTQ. I'm not sure what they're supposed to mean by that, open and accepting but I think they were, the recent ones that were put out, I believe, were from our Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I have no idea if there was any training or education that went out with them. So I'd like that to have some bookmark of, one of our goals to find that out and then figure out how to do, possibly like we did before, through the Human Rights Office with the education, et cetera. Just that to kind of get on our work plan at some point, either this year or next year.
Oh, no, and there was no education that went with that. I did a lot of work just going to businesses and getting them to display the safe zone signs and doing education on my own about what it meant. And once we had the video sharing with them, and then the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Chamber came up with the inclusive sticker, not the safe zone one anymore, but inclusive sticker. But there was nothing that followed that for the entire community to understand what it meant, what's your rights and responsibilities when you have one of these, or what are the expectations. So maybe it's a conversation to have with the CVB and the Chamber. The WDIC can reach out and see if we can partner with them in, doing some education and sort of reviving the issue.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, whether we want to rename this as a sort of as opposed to safe space, a brave space, kind of similar to the emphasis that Belisa has given in the workshops, the WDIC reading and discussion groups. It's just one of those terms that's been updated, so to speak.
It's a conversation worth having and definitely worth including. Since the original safe zone cards came from, I'm trying to remember which organization, but it's an LGBT plus advocacy organization. Then we should include that community in renaming or whatever and setting the educational materials together for it.
And working possibly with the Diversity Consortium.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's a great idea, and education and engagement around that is important. You know, I think all of us know perfectly well that for many enterprises, the commitment to the ideas behind statements like Black Lives Matter or a rainbow
Mhm.
flag is only window deep.
Amen.
And it is really offensive to see a organization marketing to our Black and brown communities or our queer communities with a display and then having something quite the contrary of a safe space inside.
Right.
I agreed, Rob, and that's why I did that personal work, because I know every business downtown wasn't going to, it would have been window dressing. And so taking the time to sit with those businesses and make sure that you understand what it is you're doing, you understand, walking through scenarios. If somebody comes into your store, how are your workers trained, going through the whole 9 yards. And I don't think that's something that I am aware of that the CVB and Chamber did. And that's why I'm suggesting that it might be a good project for us to collaborate with them around. See, you can take the legislature out of the girl. You can't take the girl out of the legislature. Or take the girl out of the legislature. You can't take the legislature out of the girl. Here I go again. So just sharing that. And real quickly, I also noticed you were talking about Juneteenth, and I'm sorry, I just can't commit to being on a planning committee this year. Although I'll try to show for some meetings, because Juneteenth is a big baby of mine. I noticed that the very weekend of Juneteenth is the very weekend that Ithaca Reggae Fest is happening. Needless to say, I'm not very happy, but yes, it is. So our vendors having to choose and decide which of these events they want to go make some money at. I think it's unfortunate that that's the weekend that was chosen.
Thanks for sharing that. I had not realized that was the same weekend.
Yeah, me either.
That could be tricky.
Dr. Clark didn't ask me to ask this, but this mean we can still come to GAC though, right? That's I know you may be with it. How do we?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But I will check in with folks here and see if there's somebody I can designate to help out.
Sure. And he didn't tell me that he didn't know I was going to say that, but I'm like, that's still super. It was live. We enjoyed ourselves.
Thanks, Deanna.
Okay. Oh, I have a question about the stickers that you guys were just talking about. So you were talking about the Visitors Bureau. Is that a city organization? I don't understand. I just don't know enough about that.
It's a separate organization, but we do provide some of their funding.
Okay. All right. And is that the same with the chamber? Okay. Okay. So they're each their own organization, but they get some of their funding from the county and the city, probably, right?
They receive it through room tax revenue, which we disperse from the county.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. So that's all I have on the agenda, unless anyone has other reports or updates or announcements that they want to share. Leslyn and Deanna. Leslyn first.
This is quick, and it has to do with proclamations. And I'm just planting a seed that these proclamations are fantastic. But I don't think that we do a good enough job sort of advertising them, either to the community or even within the county community, the county government itself. So I don't know if every department, for example, gets a copy of the Black History Month proclamation. I'm making that up, and displays it and even have a conversation about it. What does that mean? Or or here are some things that we should be doing based on what the proclamation asks. So I'm planting a seed on anything we got to talk about now to think about how do we headline these proclamations so that there is much more meaning making in them.
Deanna, is that something that the Recognition and Appreciation Subcommittee of Team Jedi could do? And working
Sure.
with the communications team as well?
I think so. The only question is really a question back to this committee. Our prior county administrator had informed me at the time that proclamations were a legislative function. And so I was asked to make sure I just shared, you know what I mean, lifted, but I felt like there was a boundary there. Trying to be supportive, does it make sense? Trying to be supportive of the legislature, but at the staff, from a staffing perspective, I was directed that whatever communication that needed to be led or provided by our legislators. And so that was why I haven't done more. Does that make sense? Like I've been trying to provide support from behind the scenes at the same time, not step on any toes. I'm just being honest in that we're happy to be supportive, but would appreciate does it make sense? Understanding what that looks like too.
So
We have a new
yes.
county administrator now.
Right.
though.
I'm just telling you.
It is a legislature
Sarah from
function to
town.
proclaim. Staff don't proclaim, legislators do the proclamation. Or when the legislatures are done, just like when the legislatures are done with a resolution, the staff still carries out that work of the resolution. And so I don't think it's blurring the lines if as a diversity committee, part of what we're doing, or even Team Jedi, is saying, hey, the legislature made this proclamation, and here are some ideas of things we can be doing to help support, highlight, amplify, headline this proclamation within our departments.
I don't disagree with any of that that I heard. Just from what I had experienced at the time, I just was proceeding with caution. So it sounds like we want to do more, and I think that makes sense. And I think we are supportive of being the worker bees and trying to move these things along and have meaningful discussions around proclamations.
And I can say as a county employee, I never saw proclamations, resolutions. I was not aware of any of those things until I started going to WDIC meetings. I've learned a lot since being here. Deanna?
Oh, that's an old hand. Who's my hand?
Oh, okay. All right. Lisa, did you have something?
I was just thinking, it's really, these proclamations are a statement by our legislature of what the county values, or what we value as an organization, what the legislature as our policy-making body is lifting up in terms of proclaiming and celebrating. And I agree, we probably can do a better job, certainly internally, to make that known and help that infiltrate through our organization. So we can give some more thought to ways to make that, to make them come alive a little more, or be known more. I'm happy to continue that discussion and think of ways to do that, as opposed to just emailing it out.
That's great. Anne?
Thanks. I know at least a couple of us legislators, have talked about, when we do resolutions, what, besides that, what, instead of just making a statement, in addition, what else can we do? What else can the county do? So I think this fits right in with what some of us have been asking. So I think the legislators would be glad and be like to be informed of, what's happening, like what are the waves, the ripple effect of this. And also, I was gonna say conversely, but maybe in addition, somehow figuring out, are there things that we can do, when we highlight these, certain times of the year, if we're hearing things back, whether it's through the climate survey or otherwise, that, what else we can do as the county as a whole, whether through the community, in the community, or through our workforce.
Thanks, Anne. Okay, anyone have anything else before we adjourn today? I see no hands. Do we need a motion to adjourn? No, we can just adjourn this meeting. Okay. Well, it's good to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. And
Catch y'all next time.
if I don't see you sooner, I'll see you next month.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm not trying. Do we,
Yeah.
are we officially the nominating committee? That's what, we didn't take an
Oh,
action.
you're right. We didn't.
Right.
We didn't.
What are we doing? Sorry. So can we do that?
How do we appoint a nominating committee?
I
need
heard
to-
Kate volunteer. So is it Deanna, Kate, and Rachel?
Right, do we need to vote on it?
If you'd like to. Someone can make a motion and go from
I'll
there.
make a motion that we have a nominating committee consisting of Kate, Deanna, and Rachel. Is that the right folks?
I will second that, but I'll amend the motion that any other interested member of WDIC may join the nominating committee at a future point.
Yes, please. Okay, we will vote with hands again. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, Deanna.
No
We
problem.
never did wrap that up. Appreciate it.
Thanks for
Okay.
hearing again.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.